Reivers are specialized shock terror troops used by the Space Marines. They are deployed surgically to deal with problematic leaders of enemy armies, as well as to cause as much confusion and terror among their ranks. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Reivers who recently got buffed and may finally have reached the point of being actually useful for something. The Reivers are very cool model-wise. I quite like them and their skull helmets. They're very cool. Reivers come in at 75 points for 5 or 150 for 10, so really cheap for the standard Space Marine stat line of 6 inches of movement, toughness 4, a 3+ save, 2 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 1. Standard, but very good for that price. In terms of ranged weapons, the Bolt Carbine is precision, 2 attacks that hit on 3s at 24-inch range, with strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1, or the special issue Bolt Pistol, which is precision with 1 attack that hits on 3s at 12-inch range with strength 4, AP 1, and damage 1. Overall, I think the Bolt Pistol is the better option here. And then in melee weapons, they come with the Combat Knife as standard, which is precision, 4 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Certainly not going to be taking down 2+ saves, but a decent volume of attacks can deal with infantry fairly well. And then the close combat weapon is simply 3 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1, and that's what you get if you bring the Bolt Carbine. In terms of innate abilities, they have Scout 6 inches, which is useful enough if you're deploying them on the board, though I usually wouldn't. They have Fearsome Assault as their main ability. At the start of the fight phase, select one enemy unit in engagement range, they must take a Battle Shock test, and they also have Terror Troops. All enemies within 6 inches of this unit must subtract 1 from Battle Shock tests, so those Battle Shock effects do go off slightly more efficiently, especially against things that are Leadership 7+, which will really feel the -1 to that test. They can all be equipped with Grav Shoots, which gives them Deep Strike, which is very useful, and they can also all take Grapnel Launchers. When moving, advancing, charging, or falling back, ignore any vertical distance traveled during that move. This, in general, means they're very hard to slow down in a lot of ways, as they don't have to, say they're going after like a unit of Eliminators in a tall building, they can't use their height to their advantage, as they can simply effectively teleport up to whatever floor they're on, thanks to their grapnel launchers, and Deep Strike gives them the ability to drop anywhere on the board, which is super useful. In terms of their loadout, every model is equipped with a special issue Bolt Pistol and Combat Knife. Every model in this unit can swap their Bolt Pistol and Combat Knife with a Bolt Carbine and Close Combat Weapon. If the Sergeant is equipped with a Bolt Carbine, he can also be equipped with a Combat Knife. And then all models in this unit can be equipped with a grapnel launcher, and all models in this unit can be equipped with grav shoots. Now, of course, I would take the grav shoots and the grapnel launchers just to make sure they're nice and mobile, and Deep Strike allows them to be used as a utility unit, especially for secondary objectives that call for them to be on far-flung objectives or parts of the board, and also just being useful for taking home field objectives. The grapnel launcher, of course, means they won't be slowed down by any small terrain getting in their way. And then I would generally take the special issue Bolt Pistol and Combat Knife, just because the extra melee is rather good, and the Bolt Pistol is solid enough with its AP, and the Bolt Carbine isn't particularly stand out, even with its slightly longer range. In terms of leader options, none of these specific chapters have any Phobos units that can lead them, as Kayvon Shrike, who uses a jump pack, so he is unable to lead these guys. The Phobos captain has those redeploys, which are very useful, but he doesn't have Deep Strike, which is the main use of Reivers, and in general, the Phobos captain doesn't really want to lead units, or if he is, he's just leading a backfield unit that's camping. Similar with the Phobos librarian, he has no Deep Strike or Scouts, so no use here either, really, as these guys don't want to be sitting around, they want to be getting around getting stuff done. The Phobos Lieutenant actually is pretty interesting in my opinion. He's cheap, has Deep Strike, and move and shoot and still charge. While it would be slight overinvestment in just a utility unit, he does basically guarantee you the ability to steal someone's home field objective, as you can Deep Strike outside 9 inches, rip off some shots with those bolt pistols, and then move d6 inches closer to them, which then makes the charge all that more easy to make. And he also adds a flurry of extra attacks to deal with whatever's camping back there. And then there's also the Reaver Lieutenant, which, Reaver Lieutenant, I think that's all that really needs to be said about that. So if you are going to give these guys a leader, make sure it's the Phobos Lieutenant, as the other characters sort of hold them back from doing what they want to do naturally, thanks to their innate Deep Strike. In terms of detachments, which is the next section we're going to cover, the Gladius, they're generally useful utility units, as they are everywhere, and I think they're actually a solid choice for Honor the Chapter to really butcher some backfield infantry, making them effectively deep striking assault intercessors, which is very solid. Anvil is a pretty static army on its own, so having these guys as cheap deep strikers is generally useful just to complement the slow-moving or not moving at all main army. The rerolls aren't super useful for Ironstorm, though useful as secondary units as they are in most places to assist the vehicles. Assault is a little redundant on them, but it is, useful extra movement, and the extra strength is useful on their pistols just to help them deal with things like Space Marines easier. Advance and Charge is handy after the Deep Strike if you are running them in Stormlands, of course. First Company is actually a weirdly good place for them just because there's an enhancement that means anytime someone fails a Battle Shock test near you, they suffer D3 mortal wounds, so if these guys get in close, you can make that very efficient. Ravenwing, their knights are already quite fast, and they're very fast in general as attachment, so not too much use there. Though with Deathwing, some utility is useful given how elite they tend to be with their Terminators and companions doing a lot of the heavy lifting. In terms of Righteous Crusaders, they appreciate the melee buffs from the Vows system, and of course a Feel No Pain never goes awry on a Space Marine. They will, in general, just do what they do best a little better here, just to chop up some guys that are camping way back from the fight. Champions of Russ is effectively the same thing as Righteous Crusaders. They appreciate the melee buffs and like to get that backfield objective. In terms of Liberator Assault Group, the extra attacks and strength makes their melee really, really solid against anything that isn't with a 2+ save, and they will be very brutal against the likes of Eldar and Sisters, who they will be wounding on 2s, of course, with a bunch of extra attacks. Lost Brethren is a pure melee speed detachment, so I'm not sure there's too much use for them here. As a similar thing with Angelic Hosts, since this is all about deep striking, you will have a lot of jump pack units who will be deep striking and re-deep striking every turn, so there isn't as much value to having these guys around to just jump onto one corner of the board. But they're still fine as grunts there as they are everywhere else. In terms of competitors, they do face one from another Phobos unit, the Suppressors. They cost very similar, though they cost the exact same rather, though they are less durable, and their autocannons are rather good for infantry. They both have Deep Strike, as I mentioned, though I generally prefer the Reivers, as they're a bit tougher, and their special rules are both kind of mediocre, so I'd rather just have more bodies to hopefully make that objective a little more secure. And then Scouts are sort of competition, sort of not. They're both cheap utility units, though in different ways. Obviously, these guys have more defense, but the Scouts have a little bit more damage at range. Scouts lack Deep Strike, though, which means they're not as useful for the far-flung things that you'll usually be dropping Reivers on, and, of course, Scouts have Infiltrators, which is something Reivers don't have. They are both very solid utility units that have different use cases, and it really just depends on what you want from a unit, rather than being really direct competition, more different flavors of the same thing than full-on competitors. In terms of their best use, I do believe Reivers have finally found a solid spot, which is great because ever since they came out, it's been a meme how weak Reivers have been. They do look really cool, so seeing that they can finally do something, I do think is very exciting. They just work really well as cheap, deep-striking utility units, and they're very tough for the cost. They won't be taking down things like Terminators or Custodes, but they can handle moderate infantry very well, and the types of units that tend to be camping backfield objectives are the kind of things that Reivers will have very little issue dealing with. And in general, just having cheap deep strike is super useful. And these guys aren't just going to die to a stiff breeze. They will have to dedicate at least a decent amount of anti-infantry shooting to deal with them, but then, of course, that's not being targeted at other units, which is a win in your book just because these guys are so cheap. If you do want to use them in a more sort of focal way, I would recommend just bringing the Lieutenant and running a unit of them to be a very, very surgical, precise sort of deep strike in and target one unit. With all the precision attacks, they can, in theory, chip down a character to death, and the extra help from the Lieutenant would not go awry there. Overall, I think Reivers have finally found a spot where they're usable, and that makes me very happy because I'd like to run some Reivers just because those skull helmets are so darn cool. I've been Spoons Rattling, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.